This episode has been generously sponsored by Serenity by Serena. Hari Om and welcome to Living Ramayana, the podcast where we delve into the timeless epic, the Ramayana. I'm your host, Brahmacharini Shripriya Chaitanya, and today we have a very special guest with us in the studio, Samyak. Samyak is one of our teachers, and we're super excited to get into today's theme with him. But before we do that, we will pick up where we left off in the story. So as we saw last time, King Dasharath decides to crown Sri Ram. He is the eldest son, he's the most qualified, and he is universally agreed to be the most suitable candidate to take over. So that decision is made with the blessings of the family guru, Vasishtha. And just as all the preparations are going on, we see that there is this sort of negative influence in the form of the desire of the deities to have their purpose fulfilled, which is that Sri Ram should leave Ayodhya and eventually reach Lanka so that he can kind of deal with Ravan. That is manifest in the character of Manthara, who is the maidservant of Kaikeyi, the mother of Bharat. So, Manthara is in the city, and she's been kind of oblivious to everything that's going on around. But she notices that now there is a lot of celebration going on. The city's been kind of cleaned up, decked out in all these, just sort of decorated. And she has no idea what's going on. So she goes and sort of asks a few people, and she is told that Ram is being crowned as Prince Regent. Basically, he's going to be the next king. Now, she goes to Kaikeyi. And when she approaches Kaikeyi, she comes in with this really kind of glum face. She looks, as though she's just received some terrible news. And obviously Kaikeyi asks her, what's wrong? What's happened? And so she says, I can't believe you're asking me. Rama is going to be crowned. And that means that your son Bharat is not going to be king. And in terms of the queens now, you will be second best because Rama's mother will be given the most importance and, will be looked after. And you'll kind of be neglected. Now, Kaikeyi's instinctive reaction to this is to dismiss everything that Manthara is saying. She herself is actually so happy that Ram is the one who is being crowned because she actually does love him. And she does, she's very accepting of the fact that he's the eldest son. He is most loved. He is most qualified. And so she says, how dare you speak this way, right? Why are you saying that this is a bad thing when it's the best thing that could have happened for any of us? Now, the conversation that takes place between Manthara and Kaikeyi that follows this kind of initial exchange is, we won't get into kind of the details of what they each say to each other, but it is really just like a masterclass in manipulation. So the way that Manthara presents what has happened, she does so in such a way that Kaikeyi completely changes her mind. And by the end of the conversation, she is filled with this kind of fear and anger and is so dead set against the idea of Rama becoming king just because Manthara has planted this seed of doubt in her mind. So what I think is most pertinent here, right, is when we look at how KK allows this to happen. How does this doubt seep in, even though she's originally convinced of what's right? She's convinced of, that Rama becoming king is the best thing. She allows her whole perception of the situation to be shifted. And the thing to think about here is the effect of the people we surround ourselves with on the way that we experience our own circumstances. And we'll get to that a little bit later. So anyway, now what happens is KK is dead set against Rama becoming king. And Mantra convinces her that the only way that she will be protected is if Rama is exiled. So she says you have to do two things. You have to make sure that one, Bharat becomes king. And two, you have to make sure that Sri Ram is exiled from Ayodhya. Because otherwise, what will happen is everyone in the city will just insist that he becomes king and they won't support Bharat. So Kaikeyi says, okay, but how will I do this? Mantra reminds her that King Dashrath had granted you two boons. Now is the time to ask for them. So Kaikeyi agrees. She's on board with the plan. And she dismisses Mantra and she makes her way to a very interesting room in the palace. So how it's described is that in the palace, there is this place called the Kopa Bhavan, which basically means the room of anger, like a sulking room. It's a place to go when you are in a bad mood and you also want everyone to know you're in a bad mood. So you either don't want anyone to talk to you or you want them to know if they're coming to speak to you that you are not in a good frame of mind. So she goes into this room and she kind of also like outfits herself in a way to reflect the fact that she's really angry. So she kind of takes off all her jewelry and she like puts on a really old sari and very dramatically just like flings herself on the floor. So she's lying on the ground and essentially just waiting to be found by King Dashrath, right? So this may or may not sound like a familiar story for those of you who are listening and have to deal with, people on a regular basis, whether it's your partners or friends or whatever it is. King Dashrath finishes his day's work and he comes to find Kaikeyi. He's expecting to find her in the palace. He doesn't find her. So he goes in, he's told she's in the, this room. And even before he steps foot in that room, he has this sense of foreboding. Something is wrong, right? Something is going to go wrong. But he goes in. He has set his mind on the fact that Ram should be king, right? So this whole time he's been thinking in terms of his responsibilities, what's the right thing to do, what is his role in this situation. But he walks into that room where Kaikeyi is, and the first thing he says to her is, "Why are you so upset? I will do anything. I will do whatever it takes. I will deal with whoever it is that's upset you." In other words, before he's even found out what's wrong, he's making promises to her. And this is the first mistake that he makes. Kaikeyi kind of says, "You're just saying that and you never actually do anything." So he says, "No, I will do whatever you ask for." She says, in this order, and this is important because the first thing she says is, "Fine, if you're prepared to do anything I want you to make Bharat as the next king instead of Sri Ram." Dashrath Maharaj smiles and he says, "Of course, no problem. Even Rama will be so happy for Bharat to be the king. He has no attachment." he is actually feeling anxious that how can I take this position when my brothers are equally as loved and qualified as me? So he says, fine. Anything else that you want? And she says, yes. I want Sri Ram to be sent into exile for 14 years. He should not be in this city, and he should not enter into any other city for 14 years. So he should live in the forest. Now, Dashrath Maharaj hears this second request, and he feels as though he's being asked to almost give up his own life. He is so attached to Ram, that the idea of sending him away is just, it's beyond his understanding. So at first he's kind of shocked and he says, you don't really mean that. Ask for anything else. And KK says, no. I want you to send Ram away for 14 years. And immediately he understands the mistake that he's made. And he says that this is not your fault. This is my death, essentially my destiny, that is coming, in your form to just deliver this circumstance to me. He tries as much as he can to convince her to change her mind, and she doesn't. And as he realizes that she's not going to change her mind, he basically just collapses. And spends the entire night before the coronation in that room, completely inconsolable. And almost just how it's described is that he's kind of almost just unconscious from the grief that he's experiencing. So at this point, it's just the two of them who know what's happening. Everyone outside the palace is still in this mood of celebration. And they are getting ready for this great occasion. Morning comes, and now it's time for everyone else to find out. And how that proceeds, and how the news is delivered to Ram, and how he reacts to that, we will see in the next episode. But for now, something to think about, which we touched on last time. But when all of this happens, when KK changes her mind, when she asks for these boons, when Mantra is sort of manipulating her, very often the question that we have is, why is it happening in this way? Right? Why couldn't it have happened in any other way? Why does it have to happen in a way that causes so much sorrow and suffering to everyone around? And this is a tendency, if we remove, looking away from the context, the tendency that we have as we experience life also, when things happen, our first question is often why, right? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening in general? And so we look into the cause. But something to think about is it ever really possible to know the cause in its entirety of anything that happens to us and anything that we experience? Is it possible for us to know that? Okay, Samyak, what do you think? Any thoughts on this?
I think we always like to be in control of ourselves, be it our emotions and our reactions to it. All of the different experiences we face are kind of modifications in a way of your state of equilibrium. Your state of equilibrium being your peace with which you approach every situation in life. Any experience comes in, you will always qualitatively assess that as good or bad, and then you'll react on that basis. And I think inherently everyone wants to be able to control that reaction even when they know they can't. And once they've reflected on the fact, and I think that reflection is a very fast one. Once they reflect on the fact that they've reacted to something, they want to know why they reacted. And I think that's in this situation how you raised in the question, why do we want to know the cause of our experiences, is because we want to see, was there anything that I could have done to have stopped that reaction? And more specifically, was there anything that I could have done to make sure I was in control of that situation, which I wasn't clearly. I think with Keikei asking these questions to Dashratha coming in the room with like that foreboding sense that he didn't know what was going to come at him. He was probably entering in knowing that there was going to be something that was going to upset him, and asking the questions as to why have these wounds come about. If I remember from the story correctly, she then says that, do you remember when we were at the battlefield and you said you can ask for two boons from me whenever you want? That at those moments, because in his perspective, that was something that was modifiable. If that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here now. So, and that's something where he feels that if he was able to control that emotion then, he could have been able to control his emotions now. There's a piece I think we find when we know that the situation was beyond our control, but until that is established as a truth, we want to always seek out, what could this have happened? Could I have changed this? And it's always about trying to change things that could have happened. Again, trying to be in control of things, emotions and reactions and situations.
Yeah. It's a way for us to find security, right? That if we understand why something has happened, then we're better able to navigate that current situation, but also moving forward. And I think it's interesting that, in terms of like the tangible experience that has led to that situation, they both know that it's, this experience where she helped him. And then he said, okay, whenever you want, these 2 boons, I'll give you whatever you want. But the thing that he is unable to understand, and also kind of she's unable to explain, is why when she was so happy when this was announced, now suddenly she's changed her mind and she is now demanding the opposite. And that's the thing in that conversation that you kind of see is he's asking like, why do you want to send Ram away? I get that you want Bharata to be king because he's your son, and I also love him and I'm happy for, that to happen. But why do you want Ram to be sent away? And she kind of, she can't really explain because she also hasn't recognized how much she's been manipulated by mantra. She doesn't know why her mind has been changed in the way that it has. And I think that, when we think about like the idea of satsang, right? Or the idea of good company or what we call bad company, is that we may not in that situation, when you're just talking to someone, like I may not be able to recognize the impact that you're having on my thoughts and my mind in that moment, but it will definitely have some sort of impact, right? And that will reflect in the way that I speak to the next person and the next decision that I make. And it's that thing of, can we come to recognize in the interaction or in the situation, like, can I recognize what effect things are having on my mind as I'm experiencing them? Which is something that Dashrath Maharaj wants an explanation to, but she just can't give in that moment.
And is she trying to also, do you think she's also reflecting back once she's made that decision, now she's in that Gopabha, in that room of anger, is she also trying to think, why have I just said what I've done? And does she ever feel any kind of regret throughout those 14 years?
It's really interesting. It kind of, that it's like, it feels like such an obvious, almost like a device to use in the literature, that there is like this anger room.
Yep.
Right?
Yes, yeah.
It's like a very physical representation of what the person is going through. But they did have that, right? And you can kind of see practically the the reasons for it.
Yeah.
I mean, now in terms of like the way real estate is, particularly in London, I don't know who can afford to have like an extra room for their anger in their house, but you can kind of see the practicality of it. But, you know, as long as she's in that room, and as long as actually even he is in that room, they're both experiencing such intense emotions. She is just overwhelmed with this kind of, like anger, also like fear. She is so also convinced in that moment that her anger is justified. And so until that situation is over, and it's actually, you know what you find is actually only really after Rama has left.
Then she feels.
Yeah.
I see.
Then she has an opportunity to kind of think and reflect and say, I did something wrong. And you know what it is? It's not even Rama leaving, and we'll see this. It is when Bharata comes back.
I see.
And she, you know, she receives him. He doesn't know what's happened. So he comes back and he's sort of like, where is everyone?
Yes,
Where's Ram? Where's Lakshman? Where's Sita ji? And she's like, you'll never guess what I've done for you. She's so excited to tell him. And he cannot believe it. He is like, how could you do this? Like, this is the worst possible thing that could ever have happened. And all this time she's been thinking, you know, I'm doing it for Bharata, right? And so he comes back and he reacts in this way. And then she's like, oh my God, like, what have I done? And it's only really at that point that she starts to reassess and kind of think about, you know, the influence that Manthara had and the fact that she allowed herself also to be so easily led. Yeah. Then she starts thinking, I shouldn't have done this. And, you know, I should have handled this differently. But whilst, and this is true for all of us, I think, right? Like when we're experiencing such intense emotion, it's really hard at that moment to introspect and to like think, okay, did I make the right decision or not? It's only really after that, like the intensity of the emotion has passed, that you can kind of really examine the choices that, you know, we've made. And then, yeah, like move on or, you know, do something different.
Does she ever manage to confront the cause of her experiences, being Manthara itself, to ask back, how did we have this discussion? How did I let myself be swayed onto you?
No. So, you know, that it's never depicted.
I see.
And so for our understanding, for the purpose of our understanding, it doesn't happen, right?
I see.
Like they don't have that conversation. And I think that it maybe is a good thing because it would be really easy, and, you know, for us also, it's so easy to blame other people.
Exactly. Without taking the responsibility of the action yourself.
Exactly. And so it would be so easy for her to be like, well,
why did you do this?
Yeah.
Why did you talk me into this?
Right?
Rather than addressing the question, why did I allow myself to listen into this?
Yeah. When, you know, we can see that she started off with like the right intention and everything. And so when it comes back to her kind of, you know, regretting what she's done, at that point, she's kind of taking responsibility. And actually the way that Ram responds to her regret and kind of, you know, her feeling terrible about herself is also like so beautifully like spoken about, that we'll kind of see as the story goes on. But it when she is able to reflect back, she's really just thinking in terms of what have I done? Yeah.
I think like one of the questions I had around this, and it goes into just something I remember in the Hanuman Chalisa, you know, when it's asked Kumati Nivar, to take away that those with the bad mindset around me. Why is it sometimes that we find a sense of solace, and I'm going to use our word solace for it, solace in choosing what we may even recognize actually might be the bad option. Why is there an almost peace in recognizing when you're seeing the path ahead of you of the good thoughts and the negative thoughts, the peace in choosing the negative? As probably in this situation with KK, she probably was able to think at that moment that, is this the right thing to do? The most dharmic thing to tell, Ram to leave the town for my son Bharat to be coronated instead. She probably assessed that was probably not the most dharmic situation, but there's a peace and a happiness in choosing that, which probably isn't the best.
Yeah. I think very often it's just because it's easy, right? It's easy to get swept away with emotion. It's easy to, if, someone is an emotional person, or if the emotion is strong, if the desire is strong, it's a lot easier to just go along with it than stop and make yourself question, is this right? Is this right at this time? Should I be doing something different? It's so easy to just think, I want it, I'm going to go for it. And so it sort of comes down to the choice that we make, right? That do we want what's easy, or do we want the potentially more difficult option, which is going to require a bit more self-effort, which is going to require a bit more kind of discipline maybe. And often it's because, that thing of kind of sliding down the easy path is because we haven't always understood or thought about what is the potential outcome. If we give ourselves a second to think, okay, in this moment I can indulge, right? And I can just go along with the desire or the emotion. But if I stop and think, what is the outcome or potential outcome, versus if I consider and make a decision based on a long-term gain, at that moment, most of us will want the long-term gain, right? We won't want short-term benefit for long-term loss. So it's often, I think, because we are unable to, we're unable to pause in that moment, and because we have not understood the long-term consequence, that then we kind of, just kind of slide down that, the easy choice.
Just one thing I thought of, Shripriya, bringing it back to the first question you asked about causes of our experiences. Could it be that we choose that easier path, which is not in our benefit, because we know that the cause of it is very clearly there? When we choose the bad path, at least we can reflect back afterwards, say that, okay, well, I know why this happened because it was this. Just an example of when people are often studying and they have the option of studying a bit more or going out with their friends. At least, let's say they choose the easier path of, let's go out, let's do something, let's go watch a movie. They reflect back on why they haven't done as well. That time spent, I can at least say to myself, oh, I went out with my friends, that's why it was bad. Whereas if you had actually gone and done the right thing in that time for you, that path at that time feels less tangible. And maybe because you don't feel that you can see that path of actually, if studying more is actually going to bring you a better result. At that time, you can't see that.
Yeah.
That's why you choose the easier path of, kind of compromising a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is so true. It's for any decision that we have to make, even on a daily basis, right? Okay, should I get out of bed 30 minutes earlier and go to the gym, or should I stay in bed for a bit longer? The results of getting up and exercising are, I'll feel maybe a little bit better in the moment, but I won't necessarily see the result of until much later. Whereas I know that if I stay in bed for a bit longer, like I'm going to feel good.
Yeah.
Right? It's dark outside, it's cold, I'm warm, like I'm comfortable. So it's that thing, I guess, of, and maybe it's just a habit we have to create, right? Of learning to think about long-term consequences. And learning to ask ourselves that question of, okay, this is what will happen now if I follow, if I make this decision, but can I kind of foresee what will happen if I make a different decision? And then I guess it's learning to make that long-term consequence like mean something. Because often we'll be like, okay, fine, maybe I'll feel better if I go to the gym, but I just want to feel good right now. And therefore, even if I know that I also want that long-term outcome, I want an immediate result. And so I'm happy to kind of
accept this.
Yeah.
And I think then what comes afterwards, that once you've seen the long-term consequence of whatever option you've taken, like with KK, how do you then overcome the regret of that? Because I feel the guilt of taking that bad decision at the time will not affect you in the short term, but the long term it will come to you and it will haunt you, as it did for KK for, I guess, for all those 14 years.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I think there's a whole episode just after Ramchandraji comes back of just the discussion with KK, where almost she begs for forgiveness from him.
Yeah. I had a really interesting thing once about guilt and regret. That guilt as an emotion is useless. It doesn't serve any purpose. It's just a way of us making us feel bad about ourselves and the things that we've done and the choices that we've made. Regret serves a purpose. Because regret is telling me that I could have and maybe should have made a different choice. And therefore it's an opportunity, like that emotion of regret is an opportunity for me to reflect and learn something about the choice I made. And also about the values I have, right? Like when we regret a decision, it's often because we know that we have chosen something that's not in line with what's important to us, right? And what we value. So when I feel it, it's an indicator to me that I'm like straying away from what's important to me. Whereas guilt is just like us beating ourselves up over and over again. It's not necessarily going to make like a tangible or like positive difference to my life, right? So I think recognizing that is part way helpful in letting go of guilt. And then just like thinking, okay, I've made a mistake. I've made a wrong decision. Like, what can I learn from it, right? And part of that is acceptance. It is me accepting that I've done something that I'm not happy with. And I guess that means taking responsibility for, our choices and our actions, that I wasn't forced into anything. And I made that choice. It's something that I've done. I can't change it. It's in the past. What can I do now? Right? And along with acceptance comes that kind of the need to also like just be compassionate towards ourselves. That I'm like, we're not perfect. We don't always have like complete knowledge of any situation. Our minds are susceptible to, the influence of whatever environment we're in. So if I do regret a decision I've made, if I can kind of give myself the space to accept it, right? And to practice compassion towards myself, I can learn from it and move on. Whereas if I stay in guilt, it's really hard to correct that mistake. And sometimes it's more likely that we'll do the same thing again. So I think that like acceptance is a big part of letting go of regret and guilt and being able to move on. But also recognizing that those experiences are like an opportunity for me to learn about myself and for me to then think about, you know, what can I do better? Like, how can I do better in the sense, like, how can I live in a way that I'm comfortable with myself? Right? That I know I'm living with integrity. I'm living according to my values.
In these situations where we've reflected on a bad decision, we reflected on a bad experience, we've expressed regret towards it, and we've got our action plan ready for how to approach in other situations ahead. And oftentimes we'll fall into the same tendency of taking that bad decision again.
Yeah.
How do we discipline ourselves to go beyond performative reflection?
This is a really good question. I think if we think about, you know, how it happens. So say, for example, I do something that I regret. So I don't know, having a conversation with someone and I snap at them, right? And I think after the conversation's over, there was no need for me to have done that. There was no reason, right? So I reflect back and I think about, okay, why I was tired. You know, they were talking about something that I didn't really want to talk about. And so my reaction was to get angry.
So you've shown your compassion to yourself now.
Right.
Yep.
So you've done that reflection.
You've done all that, yeah.
Right. And so now the next step is, okay, next time I'm in that situation, what can I do differently? Right. So then we think about, okay, I know that when I'm tired, I tend to have that kind of reaction. So next time I'm talking to that person about that thing, I'm going to try and make sure it's when I'm not tired or hungry or, you know, anything that kind of puts me in a less than ideal mood. When that topic comes up, right? It's thinking about how am I going to what am I going to do instead? So instead of snapping, I will maybe just take a second, right? Or I will say, hey, listen, I don't want to talk about this right now, or I don't feel comfortable. Can we just, you know, can we talk about something else? Having decided that I will react this way the next time we have this conversation, it's possible that I'll still snap, right? And I'll still get annoyed. And I guess that's the question, that how do we actually, you know, bring that change?
Yeah.
Right. I think a lot of it is to do with, again, like recognizing the consequence of doing the thing that we don't want to do. Like, how is it harming me and the other person when I have that short-tempered reaction? And when we actually feel, right? Like when we feel deeply the consequence, and we also know that it's not something that I want to repeat, that kind of intuition or that intuitive reaction, that stays with us, right? And it just puts us in a better position next time to remember that I don't want to react in this way. Very often, you know, we think, okay, I'd like to do it differently. And then we end up just reacting and reacting because we haven't really felt the need for a change. Like intellectually, I know I need to change. It's like with a bad habit, right? Intellectually, I know that this thing is not good for me, but I don't, you know, I like it more than I want the change. So it's like changing that emotional response, like feeling it deeply so that there is enough of a push to actually change the way that we respond in those situations, so that actually it's not just like performative, like you said.
I think like comes back to just the aspect of tangibility. You want to see, you want to be able to truly visualize what that changed version of you looks like, or that changed decision for its positivity looks like.
Yeah.
And I think the small steps in that way help.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of, we have to give ourselves evidence, right? Like
the cause of the experience.
Yeah. And so if I have an idea in my mind of where I want to get to, but my reality is really different right now, how do I convince myself that, one, that result is possible, but that I want it more than what I have right now, right? It's only in those like incremental changes that we start recognizing, actually, you know, maybe that will be better than what I have now, right? So say I want to get to a stage where every morning I can get up and go for like a 45-minute run. If I decide today, having never run a day in my life, it's not going to happen tomorrow, right? But if I say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to get up and I'm just going to go for like a 10-minute run. I'm giving myself, after that 10-minute run, I've given myself enough evidence to be like, actually, you know, maybe I can work towards it. And it does feel good right now. So imagine how good it'll feel, right, when I'm able to do more and be consistent and be regular. So that, I think, is like the, you know, the thing that we have to do. And that, you know, we see in Keiki and in this situation that she just kind of wasn't thinking. It just was the furthest thing from her mind to think about what are the potential consequences of me asking for these boons.
I just thought of, like, you know, when we were talking about the small increments, just like Abhyasa Yoga, like it is only through practice. Arjuna, that you will.
Yeah, practice, practice, practice.
And that's how you discipline yourself to make sure you take the good decisions.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a great point to end on.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for being with us today. Yes, to all our listeners, we will see you in the next episode. Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Living Ramayana. To stay updated on Chinmaya Mission UK's activities, visit our website chinmayauk.org and follow us on social media. Subscribe to this podcast and join us for the next episode. Hari Om.